our trust factor is critically important in the evolution of artificial intelligence. Some people would say we're the doctors for business, and I think it's sort of a cute analogy. It's a very incredibly important profession to where the world is going to continue to evolve. That trust that people put in our profession is hugely valuable, and it's something that we must maintain and build upon.
Hello! This is CPA Career Path Podcast with Rosey Flaherty, CPA MSA, where we dive into thrilling journeys in the world of accounting. This episode is proudly sponsored by Chapman University's Argyros College of Business and Economics, located in beautiful sunny Southern California. Are you thinking about pursuing a master's in accounting? Chapman's MSA program is tailored for ambitious professionals like you. With intimate class size and a collaborative atmosphere, you will receive personalized attention from world-class faculty who bring extensive industry expertise to the classroom. Enhance your accounting skills, fulfill CPA license requirements, and elevate your career with Chapman's flexible MSA program. Discover more and apply today at chapman.edu/MSA. So when you moved to State Society, did you ever miss your client service work?
Sure, absolutely. I missed it. I got a lot out of it. The clients I worked with, I was in charge of the audit of our largest client. I was in charge of the audit or the tax work for our largest client. So I did both of those things. I had retrained myself from audit to tax. So yeah, I missed that. And I was very active in the community in my hometown. And so I missed it. But at the same time, the ability to have an impact on the profession was very, very rewarding. And I saw the profession, I think, in a different way than most people did. And I was very, vocal about that, about how the profession should and could evolve, and have had a lot to do with that. I'm proud of that. It wasn't just me, it was the profession itself, the people in the profession. But I saw that very early. And so I felt like I could have a greater impact working at the profession level than just at a firm level. Not to take away from the firm, but the firm was very successful. I could have had a great career in my hometown doing that. But for whatever reason, I saw my maybe responsibility or my opportunity to be broader than that.
I can see that because I feel like, based on my observation, you just move up so fast, being the top level at your firm at 25 years old. I feel like the firm is not big enough for you to adapt with the talent. So it makes sense that you move to State, and then from State it's not enough, and so you move to AICPA. Now it seems like it fits your talent, that you have enough space to swim, to grow, to make so many impact. So within all those impacts you have made for AICPA, could you share with us some of the major impacts that you are very proud of?
Well, actually, part of it also is international. So I moved from having just the national view to a very a successful global view, because now our organization is truly global, and we see we're the largest professional body in the world as it relates to the profession of accountancy. There's been many, many things. Look, early in my career at the AICPA, we had Enron, WorldCom, and major legislation. That was a very significant challenge. But we also, before that, went through a very detailed process we called a vision process to imagine the profession in a much broader sense. That was very important as we went through that environment. The computerization of the CPA exam, I was fond to say back all the way in 2000, to say, you couldn't hold yourself out and say you were this high-tech global profession and have a pencil and paper exam, because that's what it was. And we moved mountains to change that. We were one of the first professional bodies in the world to go to a fully computerized, very learned-based examination. That was a major change. Obviously, during the early 2000s with Enron and WorldCom and the change that came about from the regulatory structures, very seminal event in the profession's area, footprint, if you will, but also human capital changes, the creation of CPA.com, which I pushed hard for to be sort of an innovation arm of the profession, to think about, particularly for smaller firms, to be an innovation arm. of the profession. So all of those sort of added up. And then in more recent years, the creation of a global footprint, because we have to be a big, a global, bringing together AICPA and CIMA, many changes in the standards, many changes in the ethics, many changes in how we go about regulatory environments, how we envision the profession in a lot of ways, even further evolution of the CPA exam, just recently going in to be not necessarily a test of all knowledge, but to accommodate the wide body of knowledge that we now touch from a profession perspective, the huge technological ramifications to the profession today, the implications of AI, broader assurance services, all of those things and many others were about seeing the role of a profession in a much broader and different way than maybe its historical footprints. It wasn't just me. It was a lot of volunteers, boards, incredible staff at the AICPA. But we pushed very hard to see the profession in a way that is very important to society and to employment and to people's careers, into business, into sort of the well-being of the world. And I think the profession has that role. The competencies that we bring forward are really incredible. And how could we leverage those? How could we evolve the profession as rapidly as possible and the growth of firms to really support that? And I think today the profession is much different because of those things, not just because of me, but because of a whole bunch of people. But certainly a vision that I agreed with, that the importance of our profession was probably undervalued 30 and 40 years ago, and today is much more aligned with the challenges of the world and what our skill set, our trust, our ethics, our competencies can bring to the world. And we make the world better because of that. And that, I think, is something that ought to be attractive to young people, ought to be attractive to people already in our profession as far as their career evolution is concerned. But frankly, it's a very incredibly important profession to where the world is going to continue to evolve. That trust that people put in our profession is hugely valuable, and it's something that we must maintain and build upon.
I like the fact you mentioned that the importance of our profession is undervalued 30 to 40 years ago. So now I'm just wondering if the importance of our profession is undervalued for that such a long time, but we didn't have any CPA or like profession pilot issue in the past. But then now we have that issue. How can the importance of our profession change over time? And then we have the pilot issue.
Well, look, we were always a profession, but I do think in the last, 30 or so years, we have elevated the notion of it being a profession. And we've also expanded our knowledge base, or what people view as how we can deliver the knowledge base. And the world's fast-paced. The world changes dramatically, and it's not going to slow down. And that trusted role that we play, where we're competent and we're ethical, and we can instill big picture thinking, not just narrow thinking, I think is what sets our profession apart. The reality is, if you went into small town America in the mid 1980s, the predominant professionals in Midtown America in the 1980s would have been a business lawyer, would clearly have been a civil engineer, the people who did roads and drainage and things of that nature in a community, and a doctor. And those would have been sort of the stalwarts of professionalism. Today, that's changed to a large degree. The civil engineers are still there. The role of the doctor has certainly changed dramatically in society. The role of the lawyer has shifted much more to the trial lawyers than the corporate lawyers. And frankly, we've become that third leg of that stool because we're trusted and we bring a much broader skill set in that environment. And so in the big firm area, we are that trusted sort of purveyor of knowledge that helps with listed companies and capital market systems. And, in a smaller community or mid-sized community, we're that trusted person or team of people that brings know-how to help businesses and people make their lives better. And I like to say we're the most local, the most national, and the most global of all professions. No other profession is close to that. I think what it is, it's been about an evolution of sort of painting that picture, how important we are, and hopefully motivating people to accede to that vision, because our skill set and our ethics are critically important to the ever-changing world we face, Rosey. I mean, it's the pace of change, I like to say, is never going to be as slow as it is today. And that means we have to step it up and we have to have that capability. And people want people to trust. And we're a trusted profession, much more so than any other. So I think about the profession in this notion of great competency, great trust in people, because we have that ethical sort of core as to who we are, very competent. We take competency very seriously as a profession. And then really a world that sort of thrives for that. We're active on the local, the national, the international level. That's the three levels of how businesses and society evolve. And we're right on the front lines of all of that. And you wrap all of that with the trust and competencies that we have, and it's a pretty important spot. And so I think being part of our profession, you have to take very seriously, but the opportunity to make a difference in the world is tremendous.
So competency and trust seems to be like two key elements being a CPA. I know that you have been communicating with a lot of CPAs in different states, in different countries. I'm just curious, besides these two elements that define great CPAs, how can you identify a great CPA comparing with a good CPA?
Well, I think that's a really hard question. I think ultimately the market sort of makes that determination, not me, not you. But I do think the attributes of being a great CPA is someone who takes our professional responsibility very seriously. The notion of being a professional, the notion of cultivating and delivering on that trust, and absolutely committing to constantly being competent. I think a professional should have that expectation of change and evolution. And I think the stereotype of our profession historically might have been more slow to change. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've instilled this notion of, look, for our profession to be as successful as it should be and as relied upon as it should be, we have to be really committed to change, both our knowledge base and how we do things and how we deliver on those activities. And it is true, our membership is more than 600,000 globally, and not everybody's going to step up to that. But I think, to be honest with you, Rosey, that you'd be very hard pressed to gather 600,000 people in our organization, or maybe 2 million professional accountants globally. You'd be very hard pressed to gather 2 million people of any other sort of common element and them be as ethical, as competent, as productive, as important to society on a global basis. And there's weak links in our profession. There's weak links in any group of 2 million people, but they're a lot more rare in our profession than there are in other places. And that's really a tribute to the men and women who see themselves in our profession and go into our profession and make a commitment to competency. So I don't think about it in the sort of separating the good and the bad. There are different roles. If you're in a small community and you're the key advisor to small business, what you have to produce from a competency perspective is different than if you're advising major companies or governments or whatever. That's just the nature of what we are. But those roles in every different place are really, really important. So I don't think about it as great and just good. I think the collective of our profession is great, and the weak links in our profession are very, very, very minimal.
Yeah, and you also mentioned about change and evolution. I think during the Leadership Academy class, we were taught about trending, that you need to pick up the trends, that coming up change, that you need to identify those coming up trends. That's called trending. So based on your experience working in AICPA, what are coming up trendings that you are seeing in our profession?
Well, clearly artificial intelligence is going to change everything as it relates to business and society and to our profession. I think in the short run, our trust factor is critically important in the evolution of artificial intelligence. I think the world wants something to grab hold to and to trust. The reality is there aren't a lot of things you trust in society today. We don't trust the media. We don't trust government. We don't trust big business. We don't trust sometimes our friends. We don't trust our colleagues. But yet the profession is extraordinarily trusted. The DNA, the ethics of our profession sort of circulates around this notion of only going to do something that's competent. And I'm going to, if I can, I'll partner with others to deliver what needs to be for a particular problem. We take our competency and our trust very seriously as a profession. Yeah, there are people in other professions that do that as well, but there's a lot less weak links in our profession. And, as a result, we have this incredible trust factor. And that trust factor requires us to be competent. So we got to be really, really committed in, for instance, in artificial intelligence and all of those things, to be very, very competent in that space and to be there to sort of help sort through it. Now, the reality is, if we gather again 10 years from now, AI is going to have transformed the world so much. How we would define that, Rosey, would be different 10 years from now. And so there is a part of being nimble and a part of being evolutionary to what I'm saying. I think historically in our profession, it was viewed as an unchanging profession. You learned accounting and tax. And I think if we've done anything in the last 30 years, we've changed that image of, no, this is a profession. You might want to stereotype us to be sort of unchanging or narrow, but that's not really the part of our profession. It's not reality for our profession. Our profession is very leading edge. It's technologically adept. It's worldly. And, that, I think, getting that message across and living that, being part of the profession and living that is probably the most important thing.
Yes, AI is like a hot topic on every single podcast interview I have. We're all talking about technologies, how technology is going to shape this accounting profession. I think someone told me that being a CPA today is the same as being a doctor, but you do not have to spend that many years in college, 5, 10 years in college to get the doctor degree. But you spend the same amount of years in college, 4 or 5 years in college, and then get the CPA license. Do you agree with that statement?
I think the analogy is better said that we would hope that any doctor we would go to would remain very current with the latest information about diseases and diagnostic capabilities, surgery capabilities. And I think anyone in our profession has to be committed to that sort of remaining current type of environment as well, because the world and technology and business changes, regulation changes dramatically as well. So to me, that's the better analogy. I think some people would say we're the doctors for business. And I think it's sort of a cute analogy. I wouldn't say it's a perfect analogy, but the reality is that our profession to be successful in the future, for someone entering the profession today, or someone that has, half of their career remaining in the profession, they have to be committed to changing their competencies constantly. They have to be committed to being a good communicator and a deliverer of change for their clients or their employers. They have to be ethical, because that's a core competency of our profession in that process of the ethics. And they can't be rooted in what the profession was. What we need from the profession going forward is the most important thing.
I agree with you about that. What's going forward is really important as well. So we go through a lot of hot topics in our profession. And I'm just curious if you know any specific habits that you could recommend young professions to start growing or focusing on those habits to be successful in this profession?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is the technical knowledge will only get you so far. So what we'd say is table stakes, like in someone gambling or whatever. That's what gets you to the table, right? Is table stakes. And technical knowledge is sort of that. You're not going to be considered a CPA. You're not going to be called upon without the technical knowledge, whether that's accounting and auditing or tax or technology or whatever the case may be. But the real value add is the ability of seeing big picture items, seeing business from a larger perspective, having good communication skills. I mean, if you're the smartest person in the world about what's happening, but you can't communicate it to an employer or a client or a third party, you're not going to be very effective. So communications becomes a part of that. Logical thinking, obviously ethics is in that process. But, I like to think of it as, the traditional accountancy structure is a pyramid where you have entry-level people at the bottom. They're doing a lot of entry-level work, and then the best advance, et cetera, and then the partners or the owners or whatever at the top of that pyramid. That's not the shape of the future, in my opinion. The shape of the future is a fat middle organization where we're going to have less entry-level work because of technology, but where we deliver value is to be in that middle, where the skills and the ability to connect dots, the ability to understand the bigger picture, the ability to take our technical knowledge but apply it in different ways is going to be incredibly valuable. I like to think of it as a hot air balloon turned upside down. A rounded bottom, a fat middle, and a narrow top. That narrow top is where, if it was a regular hot air balloon, is where the heated air is. That's the owners, or that's the partners in a firm, etc. The bulk of our profession is going to end up in that wide middle. And the skill sets to be successful there are going to test us. It's going to require us to accept change more, to learn things more rapidly, to accept a degree of uncertainty in the work that we're doing, because that's the type of world we're moving into. And so our profession has to evolve through that. And frankly, that may be different than other professions. And probably all professions face stresses. Certainly medicine faces stresses because of artificial intelligence. We're going to face some of that as well. But our ability to connect those dots ethically and to see a little bit into the future is really, really critical. And any CPA that's not adopting those types of things, their future is going to be narrower, in my opinion. And it's how do we take our business acumen and apply it in a current, rapid, dynamic times. That's really how our profession is going to be defined in the future.
Future is going to be very bright. I want to say that again before we finish this podcast. But thank you so much for spending time with me on this podcast and sharing so much information, so much trending and what's coming up in this profession as well. Before we actually finish this podcast, I was wondering if you have any last tips and advice for our professions.
Well, first off, I think it's very important, if you're in our profession, to understand how important our profession is. That you have to have pride in that, right? Because the world is very, very complicated, and we have to continually enhance our competencies. We have to continue to much broader than we have been. The profession today is much broader than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, and it has to continue along that sort of trend line. So that, I think, is very important. I think the second thing is you have to be committed in this profession to constantly change your personal skills, because otherwise you're not going to be as relevant to your employer or to your client or to whoever you're working with. I think that's important. And then I think have pride in our profession. I think understand how important we are. You know, we're way more important than just the work we're doing for our clients or our employers, because the employers we work for, the clients we work for, touch tens of thousands and millions of lives all over the world. And being that sort of professional, and the word profession is the key here, being that professional, ethical and competent to help make the world a better place, to help make business a better place. There's so many unknowns, so much challenge that's going on. I would encourage people in our profession to be very prideful of that and take that very seriously. And we can be the profession that makes just a significant difference in the quality of life of people, the success of business, and really the success of the world. And I think you have to think of our profession in that context.
Thank you so much, Barry. I just want to leave the last statement that, yes, I'm very proud to be a CPA, and I'm very proud to be in this profession. Thank you so much, Barry, for your time.
Rosey, great to be with you again, and great luck for the rest of your career, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.